All right, so here's kind of a different type of video. This is supposed to be like a what I've been up to lately type of video. And this video mostly exists because people ask me to explain things in a bit more detail on stream about how I managed to get this kind of pixel art look and sort of make a tutorial about it. So the whole thing with textures and environments for me started when I've been trying to build environments, sort of like this one, and it took like a couple of weeks to get this one small part of the spaceship done, and it is excruciatingly slow. And I guess the idea is that these environments are built by teams of people over the course of months or years. So trying to make an entire spaceship like this would just, I needed a faster way. And while thinking about all that, I was looking at YouTube videos, and there's a lot of these new retro video games coming out with 90s look to them, but with a little bit of a modern twist, like this volumetric fog and all that. And I figured like this kind of pixel art look has to be faster to make than modern AAA game look, because like those original games were built by teams of like a few people at most. So I thought, why don't I try to combine this kind of pixel art look with modern texturing techniques? Something like the Hotspot texturing that was used in Half-Life Alyx, which is a game I finished lately. They have textures where you just press a button and it what on earth is this? Okay. They press a button and it kind of figures out where to put the textures in real time. Just one-click texturing. And I wanted to utilize that. One of the big issues that I've had with creating textures, though, is that you never figure out what shape the texture should be or how should I build it. So that's where I just had the idea, why don't I just try sketch it. So this is my initial attempt at making a wood texture. Just kind of the hotspot texture, I should explain that first. The hotspot texture works by kind of taking the size of this face and then figuring out what is the size of face over here that I'm trying to UV, and try to match that as closely as possible to this sort of atlas mesh. So what I've done is cut that in half, then half again, and one more time, and then do the same on the other side. So that way I get this sort of these different kind of different what do you call those, aspect ratios of texture bits. So I just took that template of these halves and put it into a program and just started sketching in like 128 by 128 pixel texture. I thought like I'd have 2 centimeters per pixel, and then 1 unit or meter would be 64 pixels. Roughly. What? No, that's 128 meters. Anyway, the whole grid would be 164s, so everything would line up. And then I would take this and I would apply it on this pile of boxes, and just try out and see whether I can build something simple. Like I didn't put any texture there, but something simple like this, and just have everything line up. And that was my test. And once I've got this figured out, I took a couple attempts at trying to put everything together. I arrived at this where like this top row is the top of things. This is like if you flip it on its side, you get this. And then in here, I've got this on the front view, and then this is the side view, and then some miscellaneous small details on the sides here. And that seemed to work out okay. So after that came the part of like how do I turn this pixel art into some nice PBR textures with normal maps and whatnot, and just drawing it seemed like it's not gonna work. And then there are programs that turn diffuse textures into normal maps and whatnot, but those never work out perfectly either. So what I ended up doing at the end, I think I have this right over here. I did one take already, but the sound was garbled. So it just took the texture, and I put a UV project on it and a camera above that matches that, so I can bake this out using rendering or viewport render image or baking. And then I would just cut that up, take each blank separately, and then I put this kind of small bevel on it, and then just sculpt some details on. You'll kind of have to be careful that everything fits into 1 pixel width. That's why this is like such a large chunky bevel and a large chunky detail. Because if you make something too small, it's just going to turn into noise. And that was something that took a little bit of time to kind of figure out. Let's see if I can find. Yeah, so here's a finished sculpt. It took me multiple attempts of going back and reducing detail until I got something that looked decent in a small in a small render. And the way I would bake those out is relatively simple. I just have this material where I take the geometry normal and then add 1, because normal comes in -1 to 1 range. So you add 1 to make it 0 to 1, scale it by half to make it 0 to 1, and then because the most game engines expect the 0 or the perfect up vector to be in 128, you'll have to nudge Blender's output to a little bit up, because the math works out in a way that 127.5 is the center. You think about it, like divide 255 in half, you get 127.5. And you can test that by just putting a normal on a plane and just wiggling it around, and it'll sort of turn. But that's beside the point. So just render that out, and then normal ambient occlusion, and have one for this curvature. And the curvature is just viewport curvature with 0.5 RGB and then cavity enabled. And I think I rendered that at double scale and then scale it down at the end just to get a little bit more detail. Some of the important render settings that I found was the resolution, of course, has to be the same, and turned off the dither. And then in color management for most maps, you want to set display device to none, because you're not supposed to be not displaying the end result. It's a data map, but that's how it comes out good. And then the pixel filter size, I set that to 0, because otherwise you get Otherwise, you get like noise, or you get blur. I kind of exaggerated here, but in the pixel art, it's like really pronounced if you have even a little bit on. So you turn that to 0, and you get nice crisp lines. And even then, sometimes they come out a little bit noisy, so that's what this was for. The idea that I've been playing with pixel art for some other projects was that I'll use a filter in Krita. It's a free program, you can download it online. Go over here, and then in Gmic you find pixel denoise, and then set this to morphological, and that just gets rid of anything that's a single pixel by itself. And that ended up looking really nice in the normal map, because every one of these small pixels would be like a really bright highlight in the middle of nowhere, and this would make it look much better. And I just did that to all of the texture maps that I got. And then the nice part about having all those texture maps is I don't have to paint anything manually. So let's see. So over here with my material, I would just have, let's see, let's turn that back on. So just take the ambient occlusion. I thought that was like too dark, so I just lighten it, and then use RGB curves to bring the detail a little bit out, and then just soft light some wood color on it, and then from curvature I would take a color ramp to make this kind of a mossy texture and just overlay it on top. See, it brings a little bit of color there. Was a little bit monochromatic, so I added some green, and then I'd add the curvature again, but this time just a little bit of sharpness. And then because I wanted these things to be darker, I experimented with ID maps and whatnot, but the easiest way was to just go in the Krita and just paint a black and white mask and just overlay that on top. You just get this result. You can get different kind of wood this way. And I kind of wanted to keep it relatively muted because the albedo maps usually need to be a little bit less or less contrasty, like no ambient occlusion or anything in there, except I'm not going 100% PBR, so I have a little bit of shadow here and there, just for stylistic effect. And then from that I turn that into a roughness map. You can barely see it, and then I take the ambient occlusion again, flip it around, do some gamma, and add it on top to make the creases a little bit less reflective or more rough. That didn't end up being very useful at the end, because you put that all together, you get this sort of thing. And let's see, where's my lamp? There it is. So one of the big issues I had with this texture at the end was kind of see that, especially on this plank over here, it kind of still looks flat because of the specular light. It's sort of reflecting through the other plank. It doesn't like cast a shadow onto the side there. I was wondering like why that would be, and I figured maybe it's just like this specular thing. Like if you really think about it, there's supposed to be occlusion also in the specular component, not just the color component. And you can't get like ambient occlusion by enabling it in over here, because that only works for or geometry when you have an environment. So what I ended up doing is just take this ambient occlusion map and clamp the white to 0.5, which is the default specular value, and then add a little bit of curvature. So that way, when I add this on top, you'll notice that it adds a little bit of that ambient occlusion into the specular component, which in my opinion looks great and is like physically plausible. And then when you go over here to look at my test mesh, when you change that, it does add like a really nice sense of depth to those. Especially when you have a really bright environment. I think that's when it makes the most difference. Yeah. Oops, let's put that back in. Yeah, so that makes a big difference. I think that's something that I haven't seen anywhere. Like just put an ambient occlusion and a little bit of curvature into the specular component. Might be completely new technique. I don't know. I think Unity expects an occlusion map and does that with their standard shader. That's kind of where I got the idea from. So now I've got a diffuse map, specular occlusion, roughness, normal map. Everything is denoised and put together. And I made this, before I made that wood map, I also made this as kind of an experiment. It didn't turn out as nice. It gave me some ideas. So now the nice part about this is that in theory this should be extremely quick to use. So if I wanted to, let's say, grab these faces and do that and then do that, I just press a button and I've got, oh yeah, we're gonna do like double width and then that. There. I don't have a single width plank end for some reason. And then copy UVs and paste over there. It's also a feature of DreamUV. And then let's say I wanted to do like a small plank. You could take this, just press a button, press another button, and you have a plank over there, and then start putting these planks and the logs together. Probably use snapping or something. Build your assets this way. You can probably get some really nice environments built very quickly this way. And the technique for sketching out a texture map and trying it out as you go, and then make it look good as a sketch, then model out the height and then sculpt on top, then bake out your texture maps and then build your diffuse and roughness. That should work for basically everything. So I'm very excited about this technique, and didn't put anything in the back here. So if this kind of explanation is interesting to you, then you probably want to visit my stream. I do a stream on Twitch every single day, and I love explaining things. If you have questions, that's primarily why this video exists right now, because somebody asked me to go through everything in detail. And I'm sure there's a lot more questions that people have, because it's supposed to be a quick overview. I didn't really plan it out or script or anything, just explain it like I would during a stream. That's the easiest way for me to work these. I noticed that I start like obsessing about these videos like I do with everything, and I figured if I just go for it, it's probably better than not doing it at all. So the next part for me that I haven't gotten around to yet is using these textures to try to build some kind of small scene, sort of like what I have with my references over here. This kind of gave me an idea to build like a Skyrim type inn or something. And then had ideas for building kind of like Quake maps, which I took some screenshots of. And then my other references, which I probably should have shown before, was these texture tutorial breakdown thingies by Fanny Vergny. I don't know how to say that. Like I was looking at these while I was sketching or sculpting. I really like this style. I think I achieved what I wanted to what I wanted to make. Now let's hope I don't get lost before I actually do something with these. I think that's it though. I will catch you on the next one, or see you on a stream if you like visiting that. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you later.